Board meeting to order at 6:31 on Wednesday, October 15th. I have one very slight agenda adjustment, which is that we are going to have a second public comment. And rather than wait until after our presentation from the administration, we're going to do that right after we hear from the administration on the project plan for the capital fund. So that because that's where we're expecting the public comment on. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started with the first order of business on the agenda, which is public comment. We'll start with folks in the room, and then also if we have anyone online who would like to speak to public comment, you're welcome to just raise your hand. And when you come up for public comment, please let us know who you are and what town you're in, and we're ready to listen. This is just for the board to hear from the public about anything that's on tonight's agenda or anything that's on your mind about what's going well in our schools or what could be improved. Right? Yeah, just come on up, and I myself am a nervous public speaker, so take your time.
Totally.
And
yeah, I made
so
some
we
notes
get it.
that I will try to be very concise and I guess I am passionate, but I'm Dana Hoke. I have two middle school students. I have coached basketball for the rec department for many years. I have coached the 7th grade boys basketball team last year, the 8th grade this year. I'll co-coach again, and started the 5th and 6th grade basketball club 4 years ago. I'd like to say that in that program, we're at full capacity this fall for 32 students of all genders. And there's a lot of passion around basketball. And I know that's one of the topics that's coming up tonight is the renovation of the middle school playground. And some money is set aside, hopefully, for renovating that basketball court outside. I know that's a personal passion of mine, but there's a lot of kids in that school that are passionate about basketball and utilize that playground during the school day and after school. There aren't a lot of places in town to go and have that experience when the school isn't open. And so I'd really like you guys to consider putting some funds to upgrading that facility for those kids to enjoy that. In that program, those kids that are enjoying that space are not just like AAU kids or mini metro kids or rec kids. They're all kids that come and participate, at least in my 5-6 basketball club. So I think that's an important thing, and I'd like you to consider that when you're discussing what to do with the budget for the playground.
Thank you,
Okay,
Dana.
thank you.
Thank you. We have a pretty good crowd here. Are there others who would like to speak in public comment, or it's also okay if you're here to observe? Anyone else? Okay.
I'm William,
I'm Emmett.
and we play a lot of basketball at recess and like sometimes after school, not really, but sometimes.
Oh,
At-
yeah,
The hoops are not very good.
no, yeah, William said a lot of people play basketball races, mostly the basketball teams, but usually there are like other kids that play with us and they like to play on the hoops, and sometimes, and after school, a lot of kids do play after school, and we like the hoops aren't the best, and we got a net, but
Yeah, it's already falling apart.
yeah,
And it's not just kids who are on the teams, it's also just people who wanna just hang out, kind of just play some pickup. And there's, like Dana said, not many places around town to do that. Like not many parks with basketball hoops.
uh-huh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Yeah.
I'll be super brief because I'm really not a basketball fan. My name's Jenna Bravakis. I work at the middle school. I also live in Montpelier, and I have three kids that are basketball super fans. But I'll just say I had this really nice moment last year. I was working a little bit late. I went out to collect my kids who were shooting hoops, and it was just what I love to see, which was kids of all ages. So we had like, I think Gus was there, who was in third grade at the time, all the way up through Ellie and Cleo, who were maybe 11th and 12th grade last year. And it was just free play. And I am passionate about keeping kids off screens as much as possible and promoting any sort of like unstructured outdoor multi-age co-ed play. And what I hear from the kids a lot is, and this means nothing to me, it's a double rim, so you can't make a shot. The hoops aren't good. So in a perfect world to me, if we had like maybe some improvements on the courts, maybe they get more use. And to me, that's like where the sweet spot is in after school play, is kids recreating without grown-ups interfering. So thanks.
Thanks. Do we have anyone else in the room who'd like to speak at public comment? Is there anyone online? Libby, can you see if we have anyone raising their hands? I don't think I can tell. Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much for weighing in. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, which is just where the board will pass as one big clump, things that are pretty non-controversial and don't require a ton of discussion. And of course, any board member can pull any item off the consent agenda if for discussion or questions if they have it. So is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Thank you, Rhett.
I'll second that.
Thanks, Jill. Any discussion about the consent agenda? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Consent agenda passes. Next up is our presentation from Libby and Tom on the, oh, there you are, Tom. Okay.
And Michael.
And Mike, oh, Mike's online, great. On the project plan for capital fund use. And Libby, this one, do you have any visual for us? No,
We don't, sorry. Sorry,
okay.
my computer had windows going everywhere on my computer that I had to get straight.
No problem.
Yes, thank you. So in the I would let the operations committee kind of take this over. So the board, in the board packet, there was a more detailed plan of options for using our capital fund. And I can share my screen. Sorry. Now, so one of the things that we learned between our board meeting or the last time we spoke about around this is Tom got a much better estimate of what the labor would actually cost for the windows. And it was much, much higher than what we anticipated, right, Tom?
Yes.
So there's just a little background that the board has heard before. I added in information about the MSMS playground, which wasn't in the facilities report, but the windows history was taken straight from the facilities report. So the board has seen that before. Just a reminder that our fifth graders, now sixth graders, presented to the school board last year about the need for engaging play structures for adolescents and the importance of play for our adolescents learners that match what they have. And as Tom is digging more into doing something for MSMS, which we had originally thought would be able to be done through local monies or just a slight use of the fund balance, we do have urban soil there. So just like the UES playground in 2018, we need any work we do there, like digging holes for major climbing structures, we need to remove that dirt and take it to Coventry or wherever we take urban soils to live. So that is a cost that creates a more expensive project. And so as we were looking at different options in the operations committee, really asked us to dig into 3 options. Option 1 was paying down one of the bonds, which you don't see here, and I'll speak to in a minute. And Mike Consessi can answer board's questions about that. Option 2 was to replace the UES windows and stick with that. And option 3 was to do a UES full replacement and the MSMS egress windows that are on the bottom floor in the sustainability room, STEM lab, that kind of thing. And as we priced that out, we realized that those options were cost prohibitive, mainly because of the labor cost that we got in. So we went back to the internal administrative team without, this was after the operations committee had met, went back to the drawing board a little bit and said, okay, so could we do? And if we're thinking about safety as our #1 priority for students, the UES inner courtyard, which the paint is currently chipping into the inner courtyard with lead chips. So that causes Tom's custodial team to have to do a walk around in the inner courtyard where our youngest learners play. Just basically looking for paint chips, which is essentially looking for needles in haystacks. To make sure that littles don't put those in their mouth. The MSMS egress windows, which is a safety concern in order, because they're an egress for students in places like the sustainability lab, and the MSMS playground, as the costs started to come up a little bit because of the urban soil removal. We added an option 3. But again, that wasn't discussed with the operations committee, simply looking at the price tags that we were all seeing. And then you can see the detailed cost for each option. As Tim pointed out, some math errors that I made. So hopefully the math is good. I did go into Mike Consessi. I said, you need to check my math because I'm good at many things and math isn't one of them, to make sure that's correct. So that's what we have for the board today. The option around the bond repayment, Mike checked in with the bond bank. That bond was originally used to, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was originally used for a retirement contribution for certain staff members that we had to make, and we had to do it through a bond. And because of the use and because of the type of bond it is, but Mike can say more specifically, we cannot pay that back early. So the bond bank has said no to that. Mike is like a dog with a bone, so he's still asking some questions around that, but the bond bank was pretty clear when they emailed us back that that was not an option for us to do. Mike, do you want to speak to that at all?
You did a magnificent job, boss.
I
Keep
thank you,
going.
sir. So Tom and Mike are both here. I'm here to answer any questions about each of these options. And I think if Tom, I don't want to speak for you, but if we are looking at the best option here from the school district side of things, we would go with option 3.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So Tom, was there anything you would like to add to what?
Yeah,
Mike said?
I mean, I just know that one of the situations where the soil management report, and I wish I could have pulled this out a little quicker because I've been working with Becca with Stone Environmental type deal. So when we did our last project, I don't know if you can see this, we actually looked at, this whole area here and we did our testing. Now, by adding the fences added to this we'd actually have to test more soil. And so that's just another aspect. And then I gotta find out if we go with 20-foot high fences, do I need to go down 5 feet? Do I have to test the soil down there? So the biggest thing is not knowing, is not knowing what we're going to find, because now we're getting into our neighbors' yards too. And so we are worried about getting so close to the property lines and stuff like that. So there's that factor. And that, when Libby actually even put down here, that was going to be, that soil factor was, I think it was, she had $30,000 for estimate soil removal. I was trying to actually get a price on what it was for this last project, just so I can look at the tonnage and then try to say, okay, we're going to bore a hole, 8 inches wide and 5 feet deep. How many cubic yards of soil we're going to have to remove. And at the same time, just trying to figure out what the play structure would be. And same situation with that. Do we have to go down 6 feet with that to put down a footing? and then, find out where, now we have to remove that soil and get that off the premises. So that's where that one is going to kind of sneak in on us type deal with a soil management program we have there.
Okay.
So I was a little nervous about that project more than anything else, because I don't have a lot of answers to know when that boring starts of what we're going to find and then what we're going to have to get rid of for that. But at the same time, I did go back through and try to find double check some numbers from the last report that we did. Mansfield actually removed 2 sheets of glass over at UES, did find 1% asbestos in the glazing, 1%. But it did cost us $943 to remove that glass from the school. So that was per that one window. So putting $1,000 per window is probably a good number to put down on that with the lead and with the asbestos removal too, with the glazing. But it will solve a problem by getting rid of those, that aspect going forward, because we won't have to deal with the lead. We won't have to do the asbestos going forward with the newer windows.
Thank you, Tom.
Yep.
So just to set the expectation, we're not making a decision tonight. Our plan is to make a decision to offer this guidance and input to the administration at our next meeting. We wanted to make sure that the board had plenty of time to sit with these numbers, also get in front of the public, make sure the public can weigh in with this context. So tonight, it's really just to be asking any clarifying questions of Libby and Tom and Mike. And, if you have thoughts, definitely we'd love to hear them, but no need, no pressure to make a decision tonight.
I got a question.
Yeah.
The question's about the cost of labor. And it could be that I'm just kind of not reading the tables right, but option 1 looks like 331 windows, labor is 2.3 million. Option 2 looks like 310 windows, labor is 1.8 million. And option 3 is 95 windows and labor is also 1.8 million.
Yeah, Jake, we were doing some guessing there. Tim asked the same question. So the quote that Tom got was the 2.4 or 2.3 rather,
Yep.
for the UEF for basically option 1, right? So we've gotten a quote for labor for that. I just did some guessing as to math, because if we were to do union only, then that would only be 1 work site. They wouldn't be working in 2 separate work sites. They'd only have 1 setup to do per summer. And I was making the assumption, which could be wrong, that would be less labor costs because it's less time and there's less people having to do the people could be working just at 1 site instead of splitting between 2. So that is my guesstimate more than anything else. And then the reason why I kept that 1.8 number for the UES MSMS split at option 3 is because there's less windows, right? So they might be at 2 different job sites, but we're talking about many, many less windows that they'd have to put in. So really those are guesstimates. The one number that we did get as like the strongest estimate, because it came from EF Wall, is 2.3 million for option 1 for the labor costs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, can we ask them, like, for estimates on the other things? Because it's kind of like I understand the 2 different job site component, but option 3 is 1/3, less than 1/3 of the windows of option 2. So you'd think the labor would be something less.
And it could come down. I would ask Tom that. I don't know if my hesitancy would be accurate or not, but EF Wall is essentially doing us a favor by doing these estimates because we haven't put the project out to bid. And so I would hesitate. I don't know if that's like normal procedure for facilities. So I would ask Tom if that's normal procedure to say, hey, how about this option? Would you bid on this option and tell us how much labor is? I'm just not sure if that's kosher or not.
I also think it's also wrapped in with time and materials. There's trim pieces and stuff like that too. I think because they really don't have anything on there for that. I think that was the time and material cost too.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay, I've got Jill.
Oh.
and Jill
Okay.
so far.
I was wondering if the labor also was reflected or baked into, because there's a lot more to option 3 as far as like
Mhm.
digging and
Right.
fencing and things. Oh,
Yeah.
so that does include labor for the fencing and climbing structure.
Right.
Okay. My only question since I'm talking was, do we have to do the fencing? I know you're mentioning because that could kind of open a can of worms, and then also like, I don't want the board to like take too long in this conversation and things up, because I assume costs are gonna go up, so it's letting you all know next meeting,
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
a reasonable time. Okay.
Yeah,
Really-
Tom's gonna have to go out to bid in November.
Yeah, I mean, the fencing issue is just basically, it is a playground issue with our neighbors. We're trying to be good neighbors, and there's balls flying in neighbors' yards. And so we're trying to be a good neighbor, more than anything else, but at the same time, it just, I'd hate to have 20-foot fences. I'd hate to make it look like that, but at the same time, it would probably work a lot better with soccer balls flying around and stuff, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Tim?
Yeah, I gotta say the costs of the windows were surprising, like with the numbers that we've been talking about.
Mhm.
I think the last quote was around $500,000, right, for all the windows themselves.
No, it was closer to $1 million. That was,
For just the one building.
for the one building. Yeah, it was like 600,000, I think it was for one of the buildings, and 400,000 for the other.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So and I think we were thinking labor is sort of in the 1.2, 1.5
Yeah.
range, so.
Right.
I think the costs, sort of these new estimates are certainly, I think, just from my perspective, giving me pause. But I think also from my end, I think it makes a lot of sense to go out to bid on these projects, because that's not committing to anything, but it is getting competitive numbers on these items. So I think it's been really helpful, the process of the informal process you've had. I think it's really brought a lot of useful information to the conversation. But I'm also, until we have sort of real numbers, I think I'm not sure I would be comfortable saying 100%, this versus that. I think it would be useful to just see what this looks like, and if there are other better options, and at that point you can bid the different configurations to get to Jake's point, to get some harder numbers on those. So I think it's worth continuing to pursue. I know we're not making a decision tonight, I'm just kind of sharing where I am on it. I think it's worth continuing to pursue. I think this has really been super helpful to help us think through it. But those were big numbers that came after this last one, so it's definitely making me a little uncertain.
Right, I agree.
Yeah. But I think last thing, I think the middle school projects are really useful, and those, I feel like we've been thinking about those that have like really super direct impact on experience for both students and community members. And so I think there's a lot of value in those. Just to share where I am.
And that's one that we've had on the sort of want to get done ever since we thought we had those ESSER funds coming following the pandemic closure. And it was like at the lower end of the ESSER list. Libby, you can correct me if I'm wrong on any of my memory here, but
No, you're right. We did have it on our ESSER projects and we ran out of money.
so it feels like we've also been sort of dangling it out in front of the kids for a long time. And there are many students who used to be middle schoolers who never saw that happen. And, so I just have one question about the money at the top, just so to make sure I'm understanding. The 500,000 is what, when you say surplus from FY25, is that what we would, I can tell like the proposal is to shift that to capital fund from where it is right now. And what does that leave in the reserve fund? What does the reserve fund look like after that? Maybe Libby or Mike or somebody from the operations committee can.
Like 5% at that point, Libby and Mike.
So we still have a 5% of our operating budget.
I
Or-
believe if you move 500 over, it's unaudited at this point, so I guess,
Right.
you know, theoretically subject to some small changes, but I think we had talked about a target of 4 to 5, and I think, does that sound right?
Just over 4, I thought,
Yeah, 4 to 5%, it leaves in the,
Okay,
It is 4%, guys. It's 4% is what it would leave, I believe.
okay.
okay, good.
Which is 500,000 if those are wanting a numerical number to a percentage. It's 530.
That's what would be in our reserve fund? No, our reserve fund would be bigger than that.
Well, okay, so should I show my screen? Would that be helpful?
Go for it.
Okay. Please hold. It's I had to send a request to be able to share.
Mike, is what you're wanting to share the fund balance information?
Yeah, that walk that from the end of 24 to the end of June of 25.
Right here?
Let me see. Maybe you can. Yes, that's lovely. That's what I wanted to present. Okay. Thank you. So this is just a walk that you can see starting from, end of last year, fiscal year 24. Takes what the fund balance was, that was audited and confirmed, and then revenues, right, exceeded expenditures. So we had a surplus just in the operating fiscal year of fiscal 25. Then I believe it was June 16th at the board meeting, you guys decided to allocate $1.5 million towards the capital fund. Yep. And then there was committed fund balance, as you can see there, for the track project, and then an unreserved set aside for the net zero study. And that gives you a fund balance currently of 1.8. Okay, to keep at least 4%, or to keep at least 4% would be 1.3. As you can see right there, 1.3 million, 305 to be exact. So that means the amount over the 4% available for capital fund, for debt repayment, for whatever, is about 530,000.
Okay, great.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you for walking through that.
Yep.
Any other questions?
I didn't have a question, but I just wanted to reiterate. I know that every time we talk about spending any money, there's folks that are really concerned and have a lot of questions. And I just think it's really important for our community members who are listening to understand that the window replacement is a combination of safety and weatherization. So it provides longer term benefits, and it's also safety of students, not only the materials included in the caulking and the paint and the glass itself, but the egress out of Main Street Middle School is a safety risk because it's difficult to open those windows. So I just think it's really important for folks. This is not a cosmetic need. These are very much safety needs, not only for the students and staff that are in the building, but if in the future, at any point down the road, the district doesn't have this building anymore, this would also improve the value of the building. So I just felt like I needed to kind of point that out. It's very clear the district has tried everything they can to try to address these in a way to deal with the very challenging weatherization. It's difficult to open them. All these things have really made it so that this is a significant safety risk for students and staff. That's all. Thanks.
Thanks, Joe.
When was the building built? 1920?
When you asked him.
Yes.
Yes, yeah,
37.
yeah.
37.
Yeah, something like that.
Sorry, yeah, 37.
Yeah, they had a good run.
It's got good bones. I mean, and we just need to maintain it, so it's just, yeah.
All right. Thanks, Tom.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Libby. Thanks, Mike. We'll do a second public comment for anyone who would like to weigh in on capital fund proposal.
Tina Muncy, and I live in Montpelier. And I have to say, this is like deja vu, Lee. I cannot tell you. When I was on the board in the dark ages, we discussed the windows at Union. We're still discussing the windows at Union, except that it's not getting any cheaper.
Nope.
And so even if we can't do it all, can we do part of it? Because it just keeps getting more expensive. And so I guess that's my plug. My second plug is I spent a lot of time at Main Street Middle School, and basketball would be nice. Thanks.
Thank you, Tina. Any other?
Hey, folks, Jim Eikenberry, Montpelier resident, 2 in a row. Good to see you again. And yeah, I'll make the same plug. The windows, we got to do it. I think out of all of our buildings in the district and envisioning some future, whatever happens to us with redistricting, I think Main Street Middle, UES is always going to be our school. Who knows about Main Street Middle School, but, and we got flood concerns, who knows here, but I don't think UES is going anywhere. I think it's a great investment. I'm a parent of a kid who was in that building, was in the middle school, now is in this building. I've heard lots of stories of overheating, of the windows can't open, and let's try to do better. And like the last person just said, if we can't afford to do all the windows, then let's strategically do all the windows that lead to the greatest increase in safety and especially labor savings, right? If Tom doesn't have to send people once a week to go look for paint chips, which sounds exhausting. Like I've looked for paint chips before, and like you could lose your mind doing that and spend a lot of time. So like, and little kids, they just love putting stuff in their mouth. So let's see if we can just save us that labor cost, make the building safer, reduce the heating costs. It's a great idea. I think putting it out to bid, like Tim was saying, is a great idea. So you get real good numbers and maybe something that can be competitive. Thinking with the economy, maybe some other things are slowing down. So maybe there'll be contractors who were backed up 2 years, but now maybe they're not as much, and maybe you get something competitive. Put it out there and see. And then, we've got needs everywhere. So, good luck balancing it. I think that the improved basketball court and climbing structure is a great idea. I see kids use the swing set when we're getting ready for cross-country practice or track practice, but I think a climbing structure that is more geared towards those age of children and is still safe is a great idea. And if the neighbors are sick of balls coming over the fence, I think we have to respond to that. I'll always make a plug for the track that if there's any magical leftover money, we could use it, because just there's always challenges there. But yeah, I think put money in those windows, make those schools safer. It makes a lot of sense.
Thanks, Jim.
Yep.
Any others? Okay. We'll close public comment and invite Mike and the team. Oh.
I just wanted to note one other thing that, especially after Ms. Muncie's comment, it's been a while since we've been talking about these, but one thing that I think hasn't been seen is the work that the administration's been doing on it. They've had some test windows that were put in from different brands. I was lucky enough to get a tour a little bit ago to see what they've been working on. So there's been it's been pretty impressive kind of getting to work and see the work that they're doing on this. And I think it gives me confidence for the direction. So I just wanted to thank again, Tom and Libby and team and Mike for the work that they've done on it. I think it's been really good. No, yeah, no, I know I didn't take it that way. I've learned a lot about what's been going on, and I've been really impressed by it. So I just wanted to share it.
Some behind the scenes. You're pulling back the curtain.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tim. All right. Mike, are you up? I think you're up.
Yeah. Libby, how would you like to lay this out?
Did you do it? I don't know how to answer that question. I'm sorry.
So we have 3 folks here to answer questions.
Right.
We have Nick, over yonder to answer any questions about the data report. And then we have Rachel Whalen here to talk a little bit about letters, and Amy Kimball, our district math coach, to talk a little bit about our response to mathematics.
Why don't we start with data and then go into letters and math?
Okay.
We'd love to have you join Mike at the table, please. Nick. Thank you.
I would
be the guy to answer all the questions.
I would also love that. So I'll just sit
We
here
know.
and hold his hand because he needs support. So you received a report.
Yep.
From Nick about the fall academic data. We got some changes in academic data this year. But generally speaking, this was to kind of set the stage for what kind of data we collect. And then my two colleagues back here are going to talk about what we do with that data. One of the things that we've been talking about, Nick and I've spent some time talking about as well, is there's a flow and an arc to the different testing seasons. So in the fall, we're really looking at what are the students coming in with after a summer, and what's the comparison to the last spring, and then also new students that have moved to the area, and what are their needs. Then in the winter, it's a different set of data. And we've talked before about students in Renaissance Star that start with early literacy tests and then graduate to the reading test in Renaissance Star. And that can show different numbers in our data, but it really is a success that students are moving from a base level assessment to an upper level assessment. So what Nick put together here was really to try and tell that story a little bit, set the stage for some conversations around data.
Great. So you want to just go with questions from board members, or did you want to have anything else you wanted to share?
No, I don't really have anything
Is
to
it-
share. I mean, I think Mike, you know, every time we talk about RenStar, it comes with all the caveats as a screener and how we're using it, and that we're not making big leaps around RenStar. But I think I would also be curious to know, as you all reflect on this report, it was a different way of putting together these reports than what we've done in the past. It
Mhm.
was a simplification, tried to add more context as well. But I think a lot of more meaningful data will be coming out in our winter report, which will allow us to share different levels of assessments, VT-CAP scores, things like that, which we're not able to share yet. So I'm hopeful that in the winter academic report, we'll have much more context to chew on.
And for anybody who's watching at home, board members we're looking at our visual aid here is the academic performance report, which you can find in the board packet on the website, on the board website. So I'll see do board members have questions for Mike and Nick? And Libby, she's with us until 7:30, and then she has to go to the conference that she's attending. So I see Scott. Yep. Thanks, Fred.
Yeah, I just one really quick question. There's a different number of students that took RenStar Math and RenStar Verbal, and so or reading. I'm curious, where the difference is. Are they on very different days, or I'm just curious the discrepancy there.
Yeah, so with some of the components with the reading assessment, we have several multilingual students that don't take that assessment or take an alternate assessment, whereas they may access the mathematics assessment. That's probably the main one that we run into, that skews those numbers a bit. And then, of course, there's the two different literacy assessments, so that also is a little bit different.
I want to see, I'll go and then you, Tim. I want to just, first of all, say thanks for including the CIP goals on the report. And I like the simplified. I like that we're seeing just this good, clear snapshot of where students are at right now. My follow-up question is, given that these are the goals, the continuous improvement plan goals for each school, does the data show you right now that we're on track to hit these goals by the end of this school year?
Yeah, I don't think we're looking at it just yet in that way. I think
Okay.
as we get, because we're gonna assess 3 times. So as we get our winter assessment and our spring assessment, one of the big aspects here that we're looking at, in addition to just proficiency, is growth. So when we're looking at some of the CIP goals, you're seeing some metrics around growth and some other aspects. So RenStar does a great job of regardless of where a young person may score, seeing their growth score. So even if they're not high achieving, they can be high growth. So as we get that across our winter assessment and spring assessment, we'll be able to dial in much more on how that's impacting our CIPs with each school.
Okay.
So it is a piece that we're looking at, and we're waiting to get more data. So we're using it a bit as a leading indicator in this moment. But overall, we're waiting to see some of those growth scores over the year.
Right. And the VT cap that we will likely see in the winter, that's from spring of 2025 though, right?
Correct.
So that's our baseline from what we're growing from.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
our lagging indicator, and these are helping us guide along the way.
Yeah. Okay.
So first, I really liked the new presentation. I think the explanatory stuff really, like, I think for the first time, I really felt like I understood sort of the context, and I thought it was really helpful. The one question I had, because I went back to look at the ones from last year. For proficiency, there was sort of the at, above, and below categories, and in this one you have 4. And so where did those, like, there's the urgent action on watch, and I guess I was just curious where they map to from the old sort of 2 categories to the 4.
So I'm trying to think of what we had for the 2 categories.
I think it just
Probably
at or above.
or below.
Yeah, so it's just another way to look at the data. Renaissance Star breaks it down into these 4 categories. That's the power of it as a screener. It very quickly takes students and says, okay, generally this is where these students fall in these 4 points. And then at the school level, we can take a look at the urgent and intervention levels and make sure that we have plans for those students. Whereas when we look at proficiency, like on VT CAP, for example, it's a 1, 2, 3, and a 4. And we would usually report out on at or above proficient, which would be the 3 and the 4 in that case.
Okay.
So it's similar data, probably a different language presentation. I don't have last year's in front of me to kind of look at, but.
Okay.
Is that the RenStar that you're looking at?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's being reported as at or above
Yeah.
or below, like that's the cut.
And so those 3 other categories.
Yes.
Yeah.
On
so
watch,
those would be
intervention,
considered
In the
below
past
bench.
would have been below.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Urgent.
I was just trying to kind of.
Yeah.
see
And
that
it's so
context.
hard to do comparative work with like the screeners.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I think that.
No, but I think this is a much more helpful way to see it from my perspective. The charts kind of, I got lost in them in the old presentation, so I really appreciate that.
Jake?
Is the UES looks like it's kind of behind the other 2. Is that something that has historically been true? Do you have any theories about something about the test or the school or something else?
So there's a couple things. Not all the students at UES take the assessment in the fall. So it's fewer students taking the assessment. With the reading, again, it's split into 2 separate assessments. So when it says RenStar reading, there's a significant portion of students that aren't counted in that assessment because they're in the early literacy screener that we use. So the total numbers in the previous reports, Nick and I had talked about this. One of the things that we reported out on was total participation so that you could see the numbers of students that we were talking about and how it would shift from fall to winter and winter to spring. It's a tough kind of data story to tell, to show that and then to extrapolate why our UES numbers are a little bit lower in the fall. And you'll see it. We looked at charts that showed that it kind of goes up in the winter and we dip down a little bit in the spring as well. So with math, we are looking at the areas and content areas that come from that data and to see if it lines up with some of our math work that Amy's going to talk about as well, to see how we can respond to that. But generally with the reading, I think it's a division of the assessments, and early literacy is a different game. in terms of assessment than it is at the middle school and high school as well.
Yeah, I think it's a good tee up too for Rachel and Amy, who are gonna be able to speak to more nitty-gritty of like how they're.
Yeah.
You know, working with the instruction level on these pieces too.
Great. Any other questions for these guys before we give them a? Let them go.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Who would you like to see first from?
Let's Rachel, who's
Rachel.
standing.
All right. Stay up here.
And then I think I'm gonna be doing the share screen to keep this going. And I just need to get, oops, of course I picked the wrong one. There we go.
Nice.
So I'm here tonight to, I was here, I think 2 years ago, talking about letters, which is a professional development opportunity that we started at UES. And I'm here today to talk about 2 years, roughly 2 years later, where we're at and the impact that that's had on instruction, assessment, and student growth. And so on the next slide, I'll share a little bit about what LETTERS is. So LETTERS, which stands for Language Essentials for Users of Reading and Spelling. It's a professional learning course created by Louisa Moats, who's just, if you're into literacy, pretty big name in that world, and provides educators with just really fantastic in-depth knowledge, tools that we can use. When I talk about LETTERS, I like to just really hammer in this point that it's program agnostic, which means that regardless of the tools that you're using, curricular tools that you're using in your schools, it helps you to improve your overall literacy practice. And that's a really important piece. So the idea is anyone who goes through that, no matter where they go or what tools they have in terms of curriculum and programs, LETTERS has an impact on their overall instruction. A little kind of timeline of where we've been. So we started this back in 2023, and that year we did volume 1, units 1 through 3. And then last year we did volume 1, unit 4. So what we had done in the first year was we were using faculty meeting time weekly to do this cohort model where teachers and special educators, SLPs, interventionists, multilingual teachers, we're getting together in cohorts every Monday and working through sessions of each unit. And while that was really impactful and really drove us pretty quickly in terms of how, in terms of instruction, one of the kind of drawbacks to that was it was using up our faculty meeting time, and that was kind of pulling us away from some of the other work we needed to do. And so last year, we decided to pace it out by finishing unit 4 and balancing that with some of the other really important work we were doing as a staff. So our staff was all trained through volume 1, units 1 through 3, and then 4. And then what we're doing this year is we are offering volume 2 to staff for them to take on their own at their own pace for credit. And then we are currently Jennifer Griffith, one of our literacy interventionists, is being trained to be like a LETTERS trainer or facilitator for our building. And so with that ability, she'll be able to train new staff as they come in. And so like we have a new 4th grade teacher this year who's going to be able to be trained in volume 1 of LETTERS. So the idea is that as new staff come in who are going to be teaching literacy, they're going to be able to have that same level of training that staff has had previously.
That's incredible.
Yeah, we're really lucky. Yeah. So impact on instruction, our work with LETTERS ran parallel to some big work we did in terms of aligning our literacy curriculum at UES. And so around the same time that we were doing this LETTERS training, we were also learning a lot about programs and curricular tools that would help us to level up our instruction. And so at the tier 1 level, we adopted Foundations, and that is a phonics-based program that we use K through 3. We also, through Letters, really emphasizes the importance of phonological awareness instruction in the kindergarten and first grades. And so we use a program called Heggerty to build that. And so phonological awareness is your ability to kind of manipulate sounds and words. So your ability for breaking words into syllables, being able to isolate the initial or the middle or the final sound, and so that kind of like sound wordplay. At the tier 2 level, one of the things that we started to do in the last 2 years were these teaching assessing cycles, which were allowing us to take our screening data, that like the type of data that Nick was just presenting, and then start to get more diagnostic with it. Okay, so we see that we have a lot of students who are in this kind of urgent intervention area or intervention area. What is the specific skill that they need to work on? And so that was something else that came out of Letters, is really helping us hone in, like, instead of just saying we have these kids who are struggling with reading, what are the specific skills in reading they're struggling with? So our second graders, we might look at something like decoding words that have initial blends or 3-letter blends at the beginning. And so we learned about some tools, diagnostic tools through Letters that we started using in those teaching assessing cycles. So one example that I put up here was our kindergarten teachers. We spent a lot of time looking at letter identification and letter sound data in kindergarten. And last year, what our kindergarten teachers had learned through Letters was the importance of those short vowel sounds when reading CBC words. And so they decided to do a teaching assessing cycle. Instead of just focusing on all the letters, they really focused in on which of our students know their short vowel sounds and which ones do not, to really focus in on that, because that is where we were seeing an impact in first grade between the kids who were taking off with reading and the kids who needed that additional instruction. At the tier 3 level, and I'm going to talk about this more toward the end, something that Jennifer and I saw happen very quickly with this work in curricular alignment, and then also the impact of the Letters professional development, was that the targeted skills that we were working on in tier 3 had some pretty significant shifts in moving us forward and closing those gaps for students. So Letters has also had an impact on assessment. So what we assess, when we assess, and why we assess. So we are now doing things like assessing. We were using assessments before that were giving us a very broad overview. And this, through Letters, we were learning the importance of really targeting specific skills. So we're assessing phonological awareness. We're assessing decoding skills based on a logical scope and sequence. We're assessing something called nonsense word fluency, which is actually a really important indicator for student reading success. So it's the idea of, I mean, if you give kids a list of words, like CBC words like cat, dog, hot, pot, there is a level of decoding there, but sometimes for some kids, these are words they've just seen before. Nonsense words the word would be like, I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head, HOM, H-O-M. And the idea is that's not a familiar word, so they really have to demonstrate their ability to decode that word. Do they understand how that pattern works? Or you might have a VCE word, a word with a silent E at the end. And so vase would be a real word, lave would be a nonsense word. So do they understand the pattern? And so nonsense word fluency is something that our teachers have been doing a lot more of, and it's really helping us to assess exactly where students are kind of dropping off and where we need to pick them up and increase the instruction. We did a shift over to oral reading fluency. So timed passages, how many words read accurately in a minute. And then also doing assessments on spelling stages. And so really building that bridge between decoding, being able to read words, and encoding, being able to spell them. because encoding is often a sign of true mastery of being able to decode a pattern, because once you've internalized it enough that you can spell it, it really shows that you have that skill. When we assess, we continue to use screeners 3 times a year. And we're also using those teaching assessing cycles throughout the year to identify tier 2 skills. And then we're using diagnostic assessments both in the classroom and in our intervention and special education settings to determine what specific skills students need targeted. And I feel like the biggest impact has been on why we assess. It's really using assessment as a tool to inform our instruction in a really meaningful way. So we're assessing to identify our students at risk and to identify skills that need to be targeted for all students. So before, we might have used assessments as a way to see who did not yet have it, and kids who had it, we might have just kind of said, great, they have it. But we're also digging deeper into those kids who have it to see, okay, they have these skills, but where are they going next with it? So the impact on student learning I want to talk about is actually the impact of tier 1, which is something that we've bolstered with this professional development and our curricular alignment. The impact of tier 1 on tier 3. And so improving our universal practices across the building. I mentioned before, Jennifer and I saw a huge impact on the learners that we were working with. We saw very quickly that the students we were working in tier 3 literacy intervention were being strongly impacted by the increase of the level of the tier 1 instruction and the tier 2 instruction they were getting in the classroom, because they were receiving that instruction across all 3 tiers. Whereas when I first started in the role of literacy intervention, I was doing a lot of backfilling, it felt like, because I was giving kids things that they'd not yet had. But last year, Jennifer and I noticed that when kids were coming to us, for example, when I first started working with kids, I was doing a lot of instruction on like, what's a syllable? What's a vowel? What's a consonant? Whereas last year, when Jennifer and I would pull kids in and say, you're here to work on single syllable words, kids could tell us what a single syllable word is. They understood that a syllable is the part of a word or a word that has a vowel sound. They understood what a vowel was. They understood the importance of short and long vowels. And so having that strong foundational knowledge gave them a leg up when they came in to get that additional instruction in tier 3. And so on the next slide.
Here, Rachel, we have one question, and then I'm reminding myself that we have a new student school board rep, and she might not know tier 1, tier 3. And so just for her understanding, tier 1 is like what everybody gets everywhere in the classroom. Tier 2 is what a teacher might do to like reteach something, right? And then tier 3 is when they see an interventionist in
that's generally
schools,
how
basically.
Okay.
So I just wanted to make sure we're able to at least have some common language as we bring on new board members. And
I think you were starting to answer this when you said the tier 3 targets were shifting. You mean that you were able to
I'm going to show you in the next slide.
Because target shifting versus like outcome shifting, but the targets moved because the outcomes were improving.
So this is hard to see, but what I did was I went back through the last couple of years. I looked at the first cycle of intervention for grades 1 through 4. Because we don't typically start the year with tier 3 intervention for our kindergarten students, because tier 3 again is like intensive remediation. And so we're really wanting to make sure kids in kindergarten have like a solid experience with tier 1 before we start diving into tier 2 and tier 3. And so I went back and I looked from the fall of 2023 to this year, just to look at what kinds of skills we were targeting in that first cycle. And so when Jennifer and I were doing this work in the fall of 2023 with our grade 1 students, most of our kids that we were working with, these are beginning of the year first graders, needed a lot of work in letter ID and a little bit in letter sounds. We were primarily we had a lot of kids coming in who were needing tier 3 intervention, but they were needing it because they were missing about half of their uppercase and lowercase letters coming in. And so that's a lot of ground to cover if you're thinking about the the reading benchmarks that we're expecting for students to reach at the first grade. The next year, so that fall 2023 is when we started this letters training. By fall of 2024, we were still doing some letter ID work, but we were doing a lot more letter sounds. And we were actually had some kids starting cycle 1 needing CVC word intervention, which was really exciting because that's really an end of kindergarten, beginning of first grade skills. So it was actually a little bit in the tier 2, tier 3 range for those kiddos. So that was really exciting. And then this year, Jennifer, the students that she's working with are all, no one is needing letter ID, but they're needing letter sounds. And it's primarily kids working on CVC words, which, so those are those 3 letter words again, that have a consonant at the beginning, short vowel in the middle, and consonant at the end. When you look down in the blue, grade 2, you can see that in fall 2023, we're still intervening in second grade on letter ID and letter sounds, which was also, that's a kindergarten skill. And so we were really working, we had to kind of go all the way back for those kids. And so there was a pretty big gap there in what they needed. We were also doing some CVC word work that in that first cycle as well. Fall 2024, we had no kids who were needing intervention for letter ID and letter sounds. Really exciting. Everybody was there ready to be reading words and sentences and text. So we were doing some work with CVC words, and we were also doing some words with single syllable words that have digraphs. So like CH, SH, TH. So those are 2 consonants that come together to make one new sound. This year, it's CVC words, single syllable words with 4 phonemes or 4 sounds. So words like flat or even black would be considered that, even though it has 5 letters, it's got 4 sounds. And we do actually have a student who's getting some intervention in handwriting. And while that is definitely a skill that is developed pretty early on, it's not a skill that we had been able to prioritize in the past. So the fact that Jennifer is able to intervene on a skill like that it's really great that that student's able to get that, that work. Grade 3, we saw digraphs, blends, and R-controlled vowels were where we started in fall 2023. Fall 2024, we did have one student come in who needed letter ID. They were a new move into our school. They started the year with not all their letters and definitely not their sounds. That student ended last year reading on grade level. And a big piece of that was the parallel work, like the work that they were doing with me, but I really commend their classroom teacher, Brendan McLean, for the work that he was doing with that student in the classroom. That student was truly receiving all 3 tiers of instruction. And because of that, he was able to cover so much ground and is now a grade level reader, which is really exciting. Last year, we were able to do work. It was really exciting for Jennifer and I. Multisyllabic words or 2-syllable words, which was actually a place that we had to give ourselves some more education in because it was not an area that we'd been able to work much in the past. So that was really fun. And then this year, Jennifer's starting the year with blends, digraphs, 4 to 5 phonemes, but also working on fluency, which is really exciting to have that be a beginning of the year skill. So it's less about just the decoding, but also building that fluency, that automaticity. 4th grade is always kind of interesting because you're kind of moving out of decoding needs as much and you're doing a lot of work with spelling. And so you do have a little bit of, you can see in fall of 2023, we did have students who were reading 1-syllable words, really basic words. But last year, all of our students started the year working on multisyllabic or 2-syllable words. And this year, Jennifer is actually focusing more on spelling at the beginning of the year, which is great because as I said before, spelling is kind of that last or that final like kind of step in the mastery of making sure students have internalized those patterns. Questions?
Any questions for Rachel? I don't see any. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
This is really, really exciting to see.
Super impressive.
Yeah. Amy. Get your.
Oh, okay, I didn't know if you had that on.
Yes, I do.
Okay, so Nick kind of presented some district data from the VTCAP and STAR, but I'm gonna talk more about some street data that Mike and I gathered back in February and May of 2024. And by street data, I mean we actually wandered the hallways and met with small groups of interventionists, administrators, special educators, teachers. So we basically went on this listening tour and asked two questions. What in your opinion is going well with math instruction in MRPS? And then what in your opinion needs to change in math instruction in MRPS? And from the multiple, a lot of meetings, we took that data and we came up with some key findings and some strengths, which you'll see on the next slide here. So strengths across the board, people mentioned that we have collaborative teams in all three schools. And those collaborative teams and teachers really understand priority standards and what that means for learning and instruction. That across the board, educators are using data, summative data, formative data, observational data to inform their instruction. How did that lesson prior, yesterday, how did that work? How did today's lesson work? Right? What am I going to do tomorrow? Also looking at summative information as well. And then that also helps to identify students who might need some reteaching. And it was recognized that all three schools have that structure in their schedule. So it's known as OWL time at UES, SST time at the middle school, and Solon block at the high school. And then also it was recognized that math teachers really push the conceptual understanding, the deep understanding of mathematics, not just memorization of procedures and facts. So those were some strengths, actually a lot of strengths that came out of all the different groups. We also were looking at some strengths in the data, also recognizing that we want to continue to look at the data, especially in terms of the opportunity gap and what might be causing that in terms of potential unequal educational opportunities with all of our kids. And so that leads us kind of to that middle column, which are some areas of focus. So one thing that came up was consistency in instruction, either within a grade or vertically across grades. So that was one thing. And along with that instructional consistency, also a consistent resource for teachers. Differentiation always seems to come up, right? That's always something that we're trying to think about and work on. Professional development came up a lot, and not just for teachers, but also our instructional assistants, our special educators, our interventionists. So thinking about professional learning across all of our adults that work with students in math. And then developing consistent vertically aligned diagnostics and local assessments.
What does that mean? A vertically aligned diagnostic?
So the simplest terms would be if each school were using a different test.
Oh.
It wouldn't necessarily be a similar language all the way through for us to be able to talk about mathematics instruction. So it's at least making sure that there's a consistent language and reference so that when we look at a fourth grader in fifth grade, we can look back and it makes sense to what we're talking about. So common vocabulary, common terms, common measurements along the way.
Got it. Thank you.
So while we're keeping, building on our strengths, but we've also started to address some of the areas of focus. And so one thing that we are now using K through actually high school pre-calculus is our Open Up Resources. Open Up Resources is an open educational resource. It's free. And it is highly ranked by Ed Reports, and think of Ed Reports as your consumer reports for educational materials. So it's got some of the highest rankings on Ed Reports. It is research-based, and it provides that consistent scope and sequence K through 12. Actually, well, it's K through Algebra 2. That teachers can use. It features instructional routines that are research-based. It encourages student discourse, and when students are talking about math, that's when they get that deeper learning of math. Math is not a solo sport, right? They need to have the conversations between people to really get a good depth of understanding of the math concepts. So by using this as a foundation, now K through, like I said, they're actually using some of the units of Algebra 2 in pre-calculus. It allows teachers to really focus on the delivery of the instruction, that tier 1 instruction, as opposed to what's the task I'm going to do? What's a really, and trying to find good problems for kids to solve. So it's really allowing them to think about how am I going to get kids to talk about the math? What questions am I going to ask them as I'm watching them work on the math? It's thinking about those deeper teacher moves to get a deeper, for the students to get a deeper understanding of the concepts, which then brings us to also using, which is on the next slide, these National Council of Teachers of Mathematics 8 teaching practices. And these, again, are research-based. They come from this, what looks like a very small book, but it's a very powerful, meaty book. But these, again, push students to think deeply about math. And so these 8 teaching practices, again, are research-based, and we're introducing them during any professional learning that we're doing with the teachers and during collaborative team meetings. But if we can really get teachers to understand these 8 teaching practices, it will push students into those student math practices, which the Common Core really emphasizes, if you've ever looked at the Common Core student practices.
So are these 8 aligned with something in Common Core, or is it not?
These are the teacher moves.
Got it.
That we want teachers to do so that we will see the students doing those student practices.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really kind of the push, right, to get kids to that. And then on the last slide is just some more of our actions that the progress that we're making on some of the focus areas to address more of the instructional consistency. The instructional assistants and special educators also have full access to the Open Up resources, because again, they're working with students either in small groups or in the classroom, and we want them to know also how to deliver the instruction, right? So they have full access, and I've been also working with the instructional assistants on how to use Open Up. So that's really important. The teachers at UES, this is their first year using Open Up. The middle school's been using it for about 4 years. The high school dabbled in it a little bit last year, but they're using it now also. But you know, it takes some time to really understand the philosophy behind this resource. And so we've been working with teachers in their collaborative team meetings or in their inclusive practices meetings to unpack those lessons and do some lesson studies, that sort of thing. Differentiation and extension. Leah Schoaf and Laura Valentine and I read the book called Math Pact. And we did some professional learning at UES around consistent math representations and language rules that expire and generalizations. So again, you don't have a second grade student hearing the words like rectangle model, and then all of a sudden going to third grade and it's been called the area model. Right? So if we have that consistent language, that reduces that cognitive load there. The kids are not thinking, oh, this is something totally new that I don't know about. Whereas, oh, I remember the area model. Now I can apply that same model and really then think about the numbers that are involved as opposed to thinking they have to learn something totally new. So we did that last year. And then the high school teachers have 2 new courses this year to think about, again, extensions for the students here in their math journey. So we have a new 9th grade integrated geometry algebra 1 class. And then we have introduced AP pre-calc. So those are 2 courses that are really for pushing kids and extending the kids in that sense. More professional learning. Katie Berry, who's a math interventionist at the middle school, and I have developed 6 sessions on understanding fractions, and that's really geared toward instructional assistants. Again, helping to boost their own confidence in understanding fractions and those concepts so that when they are working with a student, they feel comfortable with that information. So those are being offered during the early release days. And then I've also been offering Southern New Hampshire University courses. So last fall, I offered one on meaningful mathematical discourse. And I had middle school and high school math teachers join me for that course. And this fall, I'm currently running a course called Fostering Mathematical Interaction and Thinking. And I've got elementary school teachers in that course. And we're diving again into the open up resources as we're incorporating the math teaching practices. So it's kind of that marriage of the 2 in that course. And then finally, I also offered a book study on rethinking disability and mathematics, a UDL math curriculum or classroom guide for grades K through 8. And that was really hitting on the inclusive math education. And I had special educators and teachers reading that book with me last spring. And so my hope is that we'll have more books to read because those are some of my favorite types of professional developments, and we can dive into a book and have conversations about how that can be implemented in a classroom. So those are kind of some highlights of where we got some data and how we're acting on that data. And we're going to continue to work on those things throughout the year to improve the equitable math education for everybody. Anything?
She knows stuff. Pretty good.
Val. Questions for Amy?
Does Open Up also create textbooks that students work in, or is it complementary?
You can purchase workbooks and you can. They do publish them. We can purchase them. It's really not meant to be in a textbook format per se. The instruction follows kind of a sequence of launching something, like launching a problem that gets kids into the math that they'll see in the 1 or 2 main tasks in the lesson. And then there's a synthesizing component to it. So when you think about a textbook, it's not like a lesson and then like 25 problems to solve like we normally would see in a textbook. It's more of launching the problem or launching a problem, having a conversation about that, and then giving a problem to a group or a pair of students to kind of work on. So it doesn't really lend itself to a like a textbooky type of format, if that makes sense.
I think so. So like math teacher, do they still use textbooks and like have, you know, curriculum design that kind of goes with a textbook? And so the open up would be like kind of complementary to all of that.
I don't think we've had a math textbook in a really long time here at Montpelier.
Dating myself, I guess.
What open up does have,
Back some, so like I can literally now see the textbook
Yeah.
that was open in front of me on my desk.
Yeah.
Open Up has a bunch of different things that kind of make up different components of that support. So there's resources for parents and students that's available within the lessons. There's resources for the teachers in many different directions, from presentation to the students to supporting problems and concepts that they can introduce, vocabulary. So there's a lot of the breakout is there. It just is packaged much differently than all in one spot.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
So there are practice problems that the teachers can print out.
Right.
But it's very different from a traditional textbook type format.
You're not alone.
I mean, we get them the first day and then you make a cover out of like
Grocery bag. Yes.
Definitely, and then you color on that marker all year long.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Amy? Well, I just have one overall comment, which is for all of this and just a note of appreciation for how you all are presenting, like, here's what we're seeing. And then with letters, here's what we've done to really level up our own game as teachers. And now with math, here's what we learned, not only from what we're seeing in student data, but now we really dug in deep and got that street data from our instructors to be able to see what is it that we need to do, because we know we have some growth to do in math as we knew, and we are still working on growth and literacy. But I just appreciate not only the work that's gone in to be able to have this high quality instruction, but also how you've presented it to the community to share it with us so we can all be aware of it and be able to participate in it if we so choose as caregivers or other caring adults. So thank you.
Thank you.
And next up, let me pull up the agenda. Welcome, Jim. We're actually moving on to policy monitoring, I think, is our next item on the agenda. So this is where the board will receive and the monitoring reports of different policies. And today, the policies that we are looking at the monitoring reports of are B3, alcohol and drug-free workplace, B4, drug and alcohol testing, and C2, student alcohol and drugs. I'm sensing a theme. And just as with the consent agenda, we generally take these all as one group, but of course, any board member can pull out any one monitoring report for questions or discussion. So is there a motion to approve B3, B4, and C2 monitoring reports?
I move we approve the 3 monitoring reports. My computer dies, I can't.
To an empty room.
Yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. We'll give it to Jim, I guess. And any discussion?
Half an hour on the phone.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And then now we have a second reading of 3 new policies that are required. I'm going to hand this over to the policy committee. If there's anything to tee up that changed from last time?
Nothing has changed from last time. We put them out. These are as they're written, required by the BSBA. Per the audit that was done, that Tim has had a lot of influence and contacted the BSBA. So those are out there for the public to make any comments if necessary, to make sure we do our due diligence. And I don't see a reason for a third reading, because there's no edits from our end.
Okay. So at our next agenda, they could be warned to be approved into practice.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right. So then our last item of business is community outreach from the board for budget input. So this is where we just have a brief conversation about things that we would like to do to get input from the community as we move into budget planning season. You know, Anna has a sick family at home, so I don't know if she's able to jump on and help us as our communications expert. But even if we don't have Anna, I think we could do a brief brainstorm of the different places that we could engage members of our community and how we might go about doing that. Thinking about the timeline for developing the budget. Outside of board meetings, of course, because we do that. Yeah, Joe.
I just remember the resources on the website being really, really helpful. It's, you know, talking about school budgets and tax rate setting and things like that is really hard to wrap your mind around, but I thought the information was really clear and easy to share. So I think it'd be great if we could do that same thing again this year.
Yeah, it was basically a dedicated page on the website.
yeah.
Yep, with a lot of FAQs.
Yes.
Or basically any AQ.
Things in any. And I think there was a presentation maybe that was also then recorded, so there was like a live presentation and you could watch it later. That helped explain it as well.
We always love our podcast with Jake.
Oh yeah, we could do a re-release or a re-record.
Wasn't it?
Wasn't it?
About something.
Which could be about the budget, or it could be about changes to come. Sorry. No, I just.
Yeah, we could do that again. I'll be up for it. Did we write something in the bridge? Like, was there a?
I think we had an ad. I'm realizing, Jill, or remembering now, the recorded presentation I think you might be thinking of is when Libby and Vic of MRPS Pi basically chatted about the budget in a 2 or 3 video series.
Okay.
These are all ideas that I think of when I think of how we would make sure our community has information, but are there other ideas that we would consider for gathering information?
I don't know. I know that our equity engagement committee will be meeting next week to talk about this topic as well. And I know that we'll also want to review whether anything budget related came up at any of our previous attempts to sort of be open to public input, specifically the fall festival, Casey. And then I think
And
perhaps
Tim was also at the fall
you were
festival.
thank you, Tim.
And Jake.
And Jake, nice. And then I think there were some folks at the MSMS open house, and Jill too. Thank you.
Brett was
But-
at the open house.
No, Scott.
Scott, sorry,
Scott
Scott was
was
at the
at
right.
the
I
house.
looked at the video
Yeah,
screen, but.
just in
I said
case
your name.
anything could inform this conversation from any of that.
So your question is, to the members of the board who've been out amongst the public recently, have we been getting questions or comments about the budget? Did anyone bring it up?
Anything that might help us.
There were a lot of questions, not a lot, there were a handful of questions throughout the day about the merger and things like that.
I'm sure.
But not about the budget.
I didn't get any.
Okay.
So you were asking like, how do we solicit feedback from the community
Yeah, input, yeah.
input? About, I don't know. Maybe like there's a QR code on the bridge ad that they can send a message to us. Maybe not so hard.
It's also tough to know what the conversation would be framed like, whether we're looking at like if level funding would be equal to a tax increase, or like sometimes we'll talk about the budget and we'll say, because we're not sure how it's going to play out, it could look like one of three possible ranges or scenarios, and that helps, I think, people frame their questions or concerns, because it's hard to know what to advocate for when you don't know what the environment will look
Nothing to
like.
react to, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the Equity Engagement Committee can get a little bit more granular on this in terms of timeline on Monday. Does that sound good? Okay. Great. And I think that's it then, everybody. Motion to adjourn.
I'm a bit readjourned.
All right. Casey, do you want to second this one?
I'll second this.
Great. Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Meeting adjourned.
The new policies required
Thank you,
by.
y'all.
Good night, Scott.
Yeah.
These